All right, good morning, everyone. We are getting ready to start our final session of the morning. It's been a powerful morning, and we have yet another really powerful, and I think it's also going to be a really practical session for us. So as you've heard throughout the day, the theme is community, work that's being done by community for community. Throughout the past couple days, I think a thread that we've heard pulled through a lot of conversations is people's stories. And we're going to hold on this theme of stories right now. We're going to dig in a little bit deeper on the topic of storytelling. And we are going to talk about how we shape our stories, how our stories shape us, how they shape the world that we live in, and how they can actually amplify our impact. And we are very fortunate to be joined today by two very, very talented and very powerful storytellers, Jeff Orlowski-Yang and Tanaya Winder. So I'm going to introduce Tanaya. She's going to come up. She's going to share some poetry with us. And then Jeff is going to come up. He's going to share some reflections about his art, his craft with us. And then we're going to have a conversation, and we're going to invite you all into that conversation as well. So please, as you listen, be thinking about the questions that you have for Jeff and Tanaya. All right, so I'm going to introduce Tanaya Winder. Tanaya's pronouns are she, her. Tanaya is a poet. She's a singer-songwriter. She's a motivational speaker. She comes from an intertribal lineage of Southern Ute, Pyramid Lake Paiute, and Duckwater Shoshone nations, where she is an enrolled citizen. She blends storytelling, singing, and spoken word to teach about different expressions of love and what she calls heart work. Her specialties include youth and women empowerment, healing trauma through art, creative writing workshops, and mental wellness advocacy. Tanaya, will you join me on the stage?
All right, good morning, everyone, if it's still morning, leaning into afternoon. So Mike Nunania Tanaya Winder, Nunania Tumutwachich Mamach. I just introduced myself in the Ute language, and I'm going to be sharing some stories with you today. You know, I heard once that the longest distance we'll ever have to travel is that 16 inches between our head and our heart, because our heart tells us one thing, our mind tells us another, and reconciling those is the hard work of heart work. So but then I also heard that the shortest distance between two people is a story. So I'm going to be telling you some stories today through poetry. And so the first poem I'm going to share, it actually comes from a time when I was visiting the Red Lake Reservation in Minnesota. And it was my first time doing a writing workshop with all girls, all female identifying. And they, I always give this prompt, if you could have any superhero power, what would it be? And for the first time, every single student said invisibility. And it just struck me differently because I was doing advocacy on raising awareness about the epidemic of murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and relatives. And so I turned it into a poem. And it's called Love Lessons in a Time of Settler Colonialism. They too know all too well that some cracks were built just for us to fall through. We live in a world that tries to still spirits each day. They steal ours by taking us away. From industrial schools to forced assimilation, genocide means removal of those who birth nations. Our living threatens. Colonization has been choking us for generations. I tell my girls, they are vessels of spirit, air to lungs expanding. This world cannot breathe without us. There are days I wish I didn't have to teach these lessons, but as an Indigenous woman, silence is deadening. There's danger in being seen. Our bodies are targets marked for violence. We carry the earth's me too inside us. A howling wind, our mothers and their mothers swallowed these bullets long ago. The voices ricochet, I wish I were invisible, I wish I were invisible, I wish, echoes in my eardrums. We know what it's like to live in fear. Colonialism's bullet sits cocked, waiting behind a finger on trigger. We breathe and speak and sing for survival. We carve out in lines. We write. I know joy. I know pain. I know love. I know love. I know lessons we've carried throughout time. Should I go missing? Don't stop searching. Drag every river until it turns red, and the waters of our name stretch a flood so wide it catches everything. And we find each other, whole and sacred, alive and breathing and breathing and breathing. Thank you. So this second poem I'm going to share comes from my book called Words Like Love. And it does have some intense things in it. It's basically just a story of things myself and my community have survived, from alcoholism to suicide. And because some of my work is heavy, being a leader, being in leadership, I always felt like I had to have this strong face, and I had to be that source of strength for my community. But poetry is where I could let loose and really process all my feels, all the things I was feeling. So sometimes I like to make cheesy jokes before poems, especially if they're heavy. And I wanted to call this one, If I Could Turn Back Time, so I could make a funny share joke, if I could turn back time. But the students I was performing it to had no idea who Cher was, so I felt kind of aged. And there's a VCR in this poem, and they did not know what VCRs were too, but. So I said, what do you all think I should call it? They said, you should call it Back to the Beginning. Sometimes I wish we could start back at the beginning, turn our existence into a videotape, call it life, then push life into a VCR, press play and pause and get the chance to rewind with our image still on screen, watching everything that ever meant anything reverse with the push of a finger. If we could press rewind, the wrinkles on these God-given shells would smoothen into soft, unscathed skin. We'd awaken from tombs, arise from the earth like trees living to become seeds, and I guess that means as babies, we'd go back into our mother's wombs. If we could press rewind, mothers or fathers who abandoned their sons or daughters wouldn't walk away, but return, run backwards, turning towards their children so they would never have to look into eyes that ever saw them as unworthy of keeping. History wouldn't repeat, but instead fold into itself like disease-ridden blankets, rolling themselves back up like yo-yos, returning to the hands that ever made those hateful gestures in the first place. Battles wouldn't end in bloodshed, but instead a ride off into a sun rising with warriors always returning from war, or boarding school with their hair flowing behind them in lengths of rivers. Rewinding would mean going back to school to unlearn all the lessons ever taught to us. We'd start books at their ending, unstring sentences into letters until all we were left with was sound, waiting to come out of our mouths, like my friend Angel. His would open to fountain gallons of vodka from liver. His throat would spill it back into bottle after bottle after bottle that he'd set back onto the shelves of a liquor store. He'd walk out of in a line so straight. It'd lead him to the day Angel's father cut off his wings when he left him fatherless, falling asleep on a bench. Rewinding, he'd unfreeze to death as warmth re-entered his body, convulsing not in dry heaving, but reheating, detoxing into calm as snowflakes would slowly rise back up to the sky. Imagine the kind of miracle time travel, like needles sucking poisonous drugs from addicted veins, pills undissolving into wholeness being pushed back into containers, fitting just right. Everything would be all right. And for our youth who contemplated taking their own lives or committed suicide, would feel blood flowing back into open cuts, their veins pulsing with life that knows it's worth saving so much that determined hands repeatedly pull away razors from wrists, leaving behind no scar, no trace, not even the memory. And any fist that hit someone in rage or abuse would loosen into outstretched arms to call you home instead of the bullet-shaped holes making their way back into the guns or mouths that shot them in the first place. If we could rewind, maybe I could remember if I ever said anything to hurt Angel. If we could rewind, I could tell Angel over and over that I loved you. I loved you, and it would always, always start with you alive and well and not me. I'd gladly give up every poem I have ever spoken, have my mouth call back each and every one of them from your ears back into my pen's failed attempts at trying to put back together the splintered pieces of our hearts, our hearts staring at a blank page, wishing we could begin again. Thank you. But we can't go back to the beginning, but we can begin again each day new. We can start over. Each day gives us that chance. So I'm going to end really quickly with the last poem that hopefully will bring us back up, but it requires your participation. So you guys know that song that goes, you know, you make me want to shout. Okay, you guys are going to do the shouts real quick. We'll practice. You know, you make me want to. Okay, that was like a 4.5. Let's try to get it to 7.3. You know, you make me want to. Okay, awesome. And you guys are going to do the haze too. Hey. Perfect. I'll let you know when we get there. Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life, and I'm feeling good. In fact, I feel great to be here with you all today with people who believe in igniting change and have the courage to create. You say you want a revolution. Well, you know, we all want to change the world. And we can. When we come together in common causes or shared beliefs, when we spread our dreams out like wings far enough to defy gravity, because we got the dreamer's disease. We got eyes that don't solely see problems, but seas of solutions, eyes that envision visions of possibilities, even when it feels like the world has left us with razor-thin hope. Never forget, you are the chosen ones. The destiny you have before you is so much bigger than you know. So find that light within you that burns so brightly. If you don't release it, you'll burst at the seams. Find the courage to follow your passion and your dreams. Remember, you are fire, and you cannot make fire feel afraid. So be brave. When it comes to changing the world, we have to stop preaching to the choir and start preaching to the fire that rises against us, the fire that rises within this heart here, these hearts here inside you. You've had everything you've ever needed. So take these words and run with them. Let your heart swell with love that's so expansive it can't hold, but must create something to make the world beautiful. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. And you may say that I'm a dreamer, but I know I'm not the only one who thinks it's uplifting and empowering when voices join together like, you know, you make me want to kick my heels up and hey. Hey, I just want you to know that there is no truer way to bring connection between what's inside here and what's out here than by sharing our voices in a universal chorus where each and every person's voice is needed and important. Thank you.
All right, what did I tell you? Tanaya, thank you. All right, next I'd like to introduce Jeff Orlowski-Yang. Jeff's pronouns are he, him. Jeff is the founder and president of Exposure Labs, a film and impact production studio that uses stories to change the world. He directed the hit Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, and I hear if you watch it, you will promptly delete all your social media accounts, and we'll chat with Jeff about that. It premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival and won 2 Primetime Emmy Awards. Previously, he was the director, producer, and cinematographer of the award-winning feature documentaries Chasing Coral and Chasing Ice. He won the 2017 Champion of the Earth Award, which is the UN's highest environmental honor. Jeff, please come on up.
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful to be here. Can we have another round of applause for Tanaya? So spectacular. Excited to talk with you afterwards. We're living through a time of immense change. I think we feel it in countless ways now. We feel it in our daily lives. We feel it in this room. We feel it at home, at work, in all these different environments. I spend so much of my time thinking about stories, thinking about the stories that we need in society right now. What stories are going to guide us, nudge us, push us, force us into a different direction? How do we leverage and use storytelling to make the change that we want to see in the world? I believe that stories are just such a deep, fundamental part of humanity. We are all, not everybody's a good storyteller, but we're all good story absorbers. We all know how to receive a story, to suck it in. I think that's deeply ingrained in our humanity. It's what has helped us survive through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. How many of you in this room feel like over the last day or two there have been conversations that have maybe pushed you a little bit outside of your comfort zone or made you reflect on your own thoughts or assumptions or values? How many people might feel a little nudged outside? Great, cool. How many of you feel like maybe we're not going far enough? We need to push harder. We need to push more aggressively. That's a bunch of hands. Great. I appreciate that both of those lenses exist in this room right now, and for me, I think that's the sweet spot of how we actually move and change culture, that we have to shift. You've got this huge spectrum, and we're moving it in a particular direction, and at both ends and at both fringes, there's always going to be discomfort. And recognizing that and honoring that means that we're moving in the right direction. It means that we're moving towards progress. Progress is chaotic. It's challenging. Transformation is challenging. I feel like we as a society are a caterpillar that's building our cocoon right now, and we have no idea what the fuck is going on. And we're all like, wait a second, like, a caterpillar literally dissolves itself and breaks itself down into goo to come out of the other side in a different transformed version of itself that I think is a pretty beautiful version when it comes out the other side. That's what I feel like we're experiencing at scale right now. And it's confusing, and it's messy, and it's challenging, but I honor and recognize the challenging conversations, the vulnerability on the stage, the intention in this room to seek out this type of change, to seek out the progress that we're looking for. With the social dilemma, we spent a lot of time exploring and studying misinformation, how social media works, how filter bubbles work, how algorithms work. I am extremely skeptical of social media. I think for all its blessings that it has given us in different ways, I think at the large scale, it is, I'm wanting to be careful with my language here. I see it as an existential threat to the way we're designing and the direction we want to go. I look at social media as being incredibly problematic. It puts us, we don't have to go into the algorithms now, we could do that later if people want, but it self-reinforces a worldview that makes it harder and harder and harder to see and empathize with others. That is part of the unintentional but profitable, so maybe very intentional, design of how these platforms work. There's a phrase that I heard many, many years ago that I think we've all heard in different ways, but an enemy is someone whose story I don't know. And I have hesitations with the enemy part of that sentence, but what I latch onto from that idea is my own inquisition into somebody else's story that I might not know. What assumptions do I have? Why do I think this way? What am I believing about some other person? What am I making up? And the counter to that, what is that person assuming of me? Right? Built into that sentence is a two-way street of what am I thinking about them? What are they thinking about me? Social media is not a place, pick your platform, whether we're talking about Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, all of these platforms are in countless ways reinforcing this own worldview, and it makes it harder and harder and harder to see somebody else's perspective. I have completely removed social media from my life. I've stopped using all platforms. I really try not to take anything from any algorithmic feed. It is, how many of you are not on social media? Just want to give a shout out for the holdouts. Beautiful, thank you. You're keeping us honest and grounded in reality. I say I say that in jest, but I say that in seriousness, in that to be able to critique the system and understand the system, we sort of need to have some separation from it. That applies at many layers, but I think with social media, it's really, really key. And what I want to invite here for all of us is just this question of how do I seek out and explore those stories that I don't know? And how do I share my story that others might not know? And it's my personal belief that that is one step amongst many steps that we need to fight to build towards a more inclusive, sustainable, regenerative world that we're hoping to build towards, this transformation that we need to push ourselves through. I think with within the world of healthcare and post-Roe, it's been a very interesting and challenging time over the last couple of weeks. And I think the state of our politics feels like it's getting more and more polarized every passing day. But I want to share just a little bit of hope that happened just within the last week when Congress has put forward legislation on the table around same-sex marriage. And despite all polarization that we feel right now, there are 47 Republican congresspeople who voted in favor of this legislation around same-sex marriage. And I want to call out, despite anyone's thoughts about Liz Cheney has come out and changed her stance on this issue and has come out and said, I used to oppose it, and I was wrong. And her sister, who is gay and is married, I have to believe that, like, what were those stories? What were those conversations in that household with intense, deep political polarization, with intense, deep professional pressure around a particular stance and worldview? And then for her to come out and say, you know what, I was wrong and I've changed my mindset on this. Like, there's self-accountability there in a way that is moving us slowly and inch by inch, but it's moving us in a direction towards a slightly better version of the system that we have right now. And so for me, when I hear that, when I see a vote that was not across political lines, I feel some sense of hope in a direction that we can go in. And I look at that as like, those conversations are not easily happening on social media. Those conversations are not easily happening on Twitter. Twitter is not a place of nuance, right? The conversations need to happen face to face. The conversations need to happen in person. Those are the opportunities, those are the spaces, the stories that we've heard today around where those conversations are happening. How do we have challenging conversations? How do we put ourselves outside of our comfort zone? How do we take accountability for our own actions? And you know what? I might have said that thing years ago, and that was wrong. I'm not going to use that language anymore. This is how I think about it now. This is my growth. This is my arc, my trajectory. How do we all embrace that for the path we want to lay ahead? That's the story I wanted to share with you today. Thank you all for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Jeff, thank you so much. There are so many things that I want to dig in with both of you on. I would like to start with inviting each of you to share a little bit more about your personal story. Who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I would just say, I often have those Zoolander moments. Who am I? No, I'm a heart worker. I just do the work I feel like I've been asked to do, and it has to do with storytelling, which is so odd because I am that introvert who has always been shy and awkward. So it's interesting that I've chosen a life where I'm very outward facing, but I just do what I feel like I've been called, and some of it has to do, again, with I feel like helping people process that pain, to transform it into power, to being brave enough to share those vulnerabilities and encourage other people. I always like to say, I am not the smartest or most talented person in my tribe or community or even my family, but I put myself out there because I hope that everybody has a voice in a story that's worth sharing, and maybe it's not meant for your thousands of followers, maybe it's just meant for your family, like the example Jeff gave about changing the sister's point of view. I think everybody has that power to be able to transform. Everybody has that fire, and I hope that by putting myself out there and sharing, like, people say, like, hey, that's just like me. I have tons of stories just like her. Why is she up on that stage? You can be up on the stage too. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I'm beautiful. I was born and raised in Staten Island, New York. My mom is Chinese from Taiwan. My dad is descendant of immigrants on his side, and I grew up always both being part of and not part of different communities. It's been this interesting thing as a half Asian. In college, we actually had a group called, it was like the Hapa group. It was all just half Asians. And we had our own identity around, like, we don't really belong, or we're always sort of invited in different spaces. And I think I've been reflecting on that more recently, just like the nuance of navigating the world in that way. For me, I think for me, it's given me, hopefully, I'd like to look at it in a positive lens around a bridge building skill set, around being able to see and empathize with different perspectives that hopefully I can share and relate with. And that's something that I find beautiful and powerful, and something that I share with similar friends with similar identities. And all of that has led me to, I grew up with a real passion for photography, and I always wanted to be a Nat Geo photographer growing up. I would cut out every photo in every magazine and paste it on my wall. And then Instagram kind of killed the value of photography and the internet, and I ended up going down this path of filmmaking and cinematography. And for me, it has just unlocked this incredible tool to be able to put my time and energy into studying a subject deeply, absorbing it, learning about it, and then learning how to distill that and share that back with the public in something that I get to make. And I just cherish art as a medium, and for me, film as a medium, to be able to say something and to try to put ideas and thoughts and stories out into the world that hopefully will just put a little bit of pressure, shift the zeitgeist a little bit. So,
Thank you. Thank you both. I could ask questions all day. I do want to encourage folks in the audience who have questions, jot them down on those index cards, pass them to the aisles. Our team members will be circulating and picking those up, and hope to get to a few of those. I want to dig in a little bit about today's theme, which is about community, and talk about how storytelling changes community, and how that works in your process for kind of translating the power of storytelling into actual change.
Yeah, I would say the thing that comes to my mind is just around mental health and around suicide prevention. I put myself out there, I tell my stories, then I've been able to connect with others who have similar stories from different Indigenous communities. So then I created an artist collective called Dream Warriors with Indigenous artists, and we'll travel to different reservations throughout the country, and we would speak, we would perform, because we all have those different modalities. We would do storytelling, and then we would do spoken word, or we would do music, and it all just depends on how can we connect with the community, how can we connect with our audience, and then that's how it started. But then taking the next step, we would do songwriting workshops or poetry writing workshops to help give that outlet that, storytelling is medicine, music is medicine, poetry is medicine, and those are the things that helped us survive and heal. So we passed that on, and then next thing you know, a tribal behavioral health center is bringing us in to do a grant to help do a suicide prevention summit for their community. And so I've seen it bring change in getting more funding and more resources. And, I had heard earlier they were talking about transactional versus transformational. And we tried not to be, helicopter artists, just come in, see, and then leave. But we'll maintain these relationships. And so the Southern Ute community, which through a Colorado Health Foundation grant has brought us year after year to teach students music and poetry. And it's been awesome seeing some of them continue. Like, they still share, they still do music, some of them do videography, photography. It's been really beautiful to see that change. And now it leading to getting out there more. I'm invited to be a consultant for this organization where, because I don't want to be the person like, you have to come to our community. It's like, no, you all can get those skills too to teach and do the workshops yourself. So now I am teaching others how to do the writing workshops that I do and that we do. And I really just see it building like this awesome army of amazing healing warriors to be able to help shift and give mental health the significance and the care and attention that it needs.
Wow, thank you.
Film is an interesting medium because we often make something and then it gets distributed through different networks and different channels and reaches out to the public in different ways. But something that our team really focuses on is community events with film. And this is something that at Exposure Labs our team has spent so much time and energy on, and it's something that I think we're all almost the most proud of, in fact, almost more so than the filmmaking itself. Because you can tell a story about a particular issue, and especially in a COVID world, especially with streaming platforms, people are watching it at home on their iPad when they're on their TV, iPad, and iPhone at the same time. And that, by the way, is just like the algorithms just tripled their revenue because it got you to be on all three at the same time. But we're so distracted in our typical home environments and how we absorb content in that fashion. In the film world, film screenings, film festivals, community events, that's always been a really deep core of how people come together. And a lot of the work that we do is using films, not just ours, but other filmmakers' work, to bring communities together and say, hey, let's gather. We're going to watch this movie together. These are the people that are going to come speak afterwards. We're going to have a panel. We're going to have a deep conversation. We're going to explore how this issue affects us in our hometown. And you can draw the connections between, okay, here's a story of some climate thing happening over there, but this is how it looks in our backyard. This is what it means to us. And that's the work that our team has really been focusing on. We've been working on building different models. This applies, in my mind, it applies to any issue out there. Just within health, there are countless documentaries that have been made about various aspects of healthcare. And how can communities come together and use film as a tool to organize, to hold challenging conversations. You can use a film to prod the conversation. I use it all the time with family and friends around, like, this is not my opinion, but maybe you should watch this movie, and let's talk about it. And so I think there's something really, really magical in the medium and using it to organize. And sometimes we've done countless work with climate organizing, and sometimes the most work happens in the dinner that precedes the film screening. And you almost didn't even need to have the film screening, but it was the excuse to bring different people together that wouldn't normally meet or congregate or have those conversations. So just planting that seed for all of you to think about, like, can film and stories be used as a tool to build your communities, to advance your mission, and to serve those goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Jeff, a follow-up on that. You mentioned misinformation in your remarks, and I'm just curious about, have you seen that approach effective in dislodging or countering misinformation when you can gather people together, screen a film, have the dialogue?
I feel like years ago, I didn't have an opinion on countless things. There are so many things where it's like, oh, I genuinely don't have a stance on that. I should trust an expert. And now that's like all freaking, like everybody has a deep-seated opinion on everything. And in part, the algorithms have literally tested your stance on every single thing. It has thrown a spectrum of views about every political possible issue, anything that's remotely divisive, and figured out, oh, you land on this side of this issue, and you land on this side of this other issue. And we live in this age now where we have a hard time trusting or even discerning what is true, right? The whole post-truth
Right.
worldview, and that then gets manipulated, that gets weaponized by powers that be that want to weaponize it in particular ways. And we're stuck in this massive misinformation filter that goes through the internet. I sort of joke sometimes with friends like, oh, you're on social media. I won't trust anything you think about any issue. Like, I say that jokingly, but it's like, how do you know what you know about anything? Why do you believe what you believe? Can you hold up scrutiny to your own stance on your issues and really discern, oh, I know these things. I have a pretty friggin' confident view on climate change because I spent years studying and reading papers. There are a lot of other things that I'm trusting through friends, through tribal groups, through whatever circles I exist in, what influences might have shaped my stance on something. So I am very dubious and skeptical of how misinformation exists on the internet and also how we get out of it. How do we build towards truth? How do we build towards a rational understanding of the world? And that's what we need. Like, our challenges are getting greater and greater to the point where we need good information to solve our biggest threats. Climate change being one of countless examples of that. And so I don't remember what your question was, and I'm on a long tangent here, but it's something where I think my hope is that each of us tries to take some action towards questioning what we see on social, removing ourselves from headlines that we don't even read, and we now have an assumption of, oh, that must be true because I saw that clickbait headline. That's a very, very slippery slope. It unfortunately is how the entire internet is designed right now, and immensely profitable. Surveillance capitalism being another form of just extractive capitalism that's turned us all into a raw resource for extraction. I'll try to avoid going to the deep dark place.
Yeah.
There, but,
Oh, you haven't yet?
Yeah, great. No, it gets worse. But that's where we're at.
All right. And so, Tanaya, I'm not going to put it on your shoulders to make us optimistic about social media, but I know that you mentioned in one of the calls that we had prior to the session about at least some potential that you see in social media and some of the work that you do with youth. And so talk about how you see it as a possible tool for some of your work.
Yeah, I mean, for me in my previous youth work, that is just where the youth are communicating. Like, if I ask somebody how they're doing, they might tell me something different, and I'm seeing something on their Instagram or their TikTok. And so for me, it provided just a different inlet and a way to try to connect and meet them where they're at. But actually, after seeing Jeff's documentary and about when it was talking about just changing the way, you know, our young people think, what they think beauty is, how they think they should look, and all these different filters. And, you know, I just felt like I needed to, again, just shift some of the programming I was offering for the youth that I work with. And I have, you know, younger siblings. One of my younger sisters is 12, and the other one is 10. And just thinking about this world they're growing up in, and so, you know, trying to shift to meet the moment. And for me, that meant doing more self-love, self-care workshops, things where we really do like critique some of those things, like. You know, everybody looks different. What is this colonized Western standard of beauty that doesn't apply to us, or was just made up to make us buy all of these different things? And so, for me, it really just helped try to shift the awareness and plant those seeds where I can, starting younger. And then in some advocacy work, you know, I've seen even now, you know, with the murder missing Indigenous relatives epidemic, a lot of people will share on social media like pictures of when someone went missing and where, and you know, people will organize searches to help look for our relatives who are missing. And I've seen social media be positive in that way and help getting the word out a lot more quickly than these systems that aren't designed to help us, or we have to use what we can to make it work for us.
Thank you. Do you wanna...
I echo everything Tanaya said here, and while I have this like anti-social media bent to me, I compare it to fossil fuels in some ways around like, yeah, we can fly planes and we can drive cars and look at the great opportunity that comes from that, and yet when we stand back and look at the big picture, what is that contributing in mass? And I think the essence of what I'm hoping to just plant as a seed is like, the real goal of these platforms is connection. It's community and connection. Social media arguably does not actually provide connection. It provides connectivity. It provides the ability to connect to others. I believe that we will hopefully see new technologies come out that make this current iteration of big social irrelevant and moot. Because who actually feels better after they use social media, right? Like, we want technology that brings us together, that makes us feel closer to our friends and family. I look at FaceTime and Zoom as technologies that we pay for that aren't free, different advertising model, but technologies that actually bring connection, that bring us there. So my point there is just like, recognize that those platforms are a very incomplete and algorithmically filtered version of the world, and we need to remind ourselves this is not what the whole world looks like. For every progressive post, there's an equal and opposite regressive post that exists somewhere on the internet that you're not seeing. And that's like the meta design of the system right now. And so absolutely, like, if you can use it as a tool for yourself intentionally and with care, and if you can actually get off of those platforms to build real authentic community and connection, I think that's the North Star that we're looking for.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So thank you. You all have sent some really great questions. So I'm going to turn to some audience questions now. So the first one is reflecting, Tanaya, your point that everyone has stories to share. And so often the issues people are telling stories about trigger trauma for themselves or others. And so how do you intentionally help others tell their stories without causing harm or mitigating harm?
Yeah, with great care. Every time I enter a space, I always try to have that mentality of a doctor, do no harm, and to leave a place and hopefully people in a better place than when we met and interacted. But definitely I feel like when it comes to writing and when I can spend time with people, I always just am very intentional about having a grounding and then like mindfulness, breathing, and then ending with the grounding, but also just telling people, your story is yours. You can choose what you want to keep private. You can choose what you want to share and what you're ready to share and what you're not ready to share. A lot of the things, just for me, that I write about, I have to have that psychic distance. I have to have enough time. I think of it like a literal scar, I hope I'm not the only one who does this, but sometimes you have a scab and you like pick at your scab and then it's bleeding and you have to wait for it to heal all over again. It's the same thing with our emotional wounds, and when it comes to writing, like, it has to be healed before you can go back there and try to process that trauma, try to revisit it, or else you'll just, risk wounding yourself again. And I try to encourage people to have that care and those limits as well, and to take space where you need to take space, because it is hard dealing with your trauma and your historical traumas and all of those things. They're so interlaced, and making sure that you do find ways to address them, though. It's almost like the more you run from it, it's like just stuffing, a bunch of balloons in the closet, and you're like, I'm fine, it's gonna be okay. And then all of a sudden it just spills out everywhere. So you have to, move through it. You can't go around it. I always say, it doesn't matter how successful you are, you can't outrun your traumas. It will catch up to you. So you have to decide when you want to stop and face it and heal it. And healing is hard work, but when you do that work, you're healing your family, your community, and your ancestors as well.
Thank you.
Just to add one small thing there, part of that also is it a safe space on the receiving end? Like, are the people who are receiving the story showing up and honoring and providing a welcoming space for a story to be shared? Nobody wants to share a story to somebody that's just going to bounce off or deflect or go into a void. So that's another two-way street there of like, can you honor the story in somebody else by genuinely being there to receive it?
Yeah. Thank you both. So an audience member has a question about how you balance or how you think about storytelling and telling someone's lived experience, or inviting people to tell their lived experience with the sense that it's extractive, or you could be exploiting individuals in some way by telling or retelling their story. What are your thoughts on that?
We spend a lot of time in the documentary film world discussing this at countless levels, because filmmakers often have to go and film somebody else's story. And there is a really deep conversation happening in the industry around what does it mean for that to be extractive versus transformative? Is it transactional or not? And I think the real essence that the way the film community is talking about it more and more is like just examining and questioning, is this transactional? Does it feel transactional? Is there a real relationship being born here? Is this a one and done piece, I see you later, or is it like long, deep standing relationship with a person or a community when trying to help elevate and share that story? So the way I look at it, just trying to summarize that, it's like, if you're going in with intentions for real relationship and real connection, I think you can go in looking with confidence that I am not intending this to be transactional or extractive. I am here as an ally. I'm here wanting to show up. I'm here wanting to elevate this person's story, and to that I would use as a North Star, I'd say.
Yeah. That question just made me think of my whole MFA experience, where we would always read books written by white people about brown communities. And, for me, I think it's all about consent as well. I've had people in my community tell me things and ask me to write about it, but for me, writing and storytelling, it's so spiritual. I will pray, I will smudge before I write, because it is ceremony to me and it is sacred. And my mom always says words are seeds, and you have to be careful of the seeds you plant, because it's going to take root, it's going to take life. And so I am very careful in thinking about what I write about and why I'm writing it, and who's it for. And if I do have permission to incorporate someone else's experience, I will change names, I will do things to protect people, but I never, I try my best not to exploit or get into that mode of extraction, because it just doesn't have good energy, and I always have to think, is this my story to tell? And if it's not, then I don't need to tell it.
Thank you. All right, with the few minutes that we have left, I have some questions that were posed to each of you individually. So, Jeff, I want to start with you, and an audience member is curious what your next project is going to be.
I wish I could tell you, but our team, we're working on a whole slate of 5 years worth of stories that all in various ways distill down to how do we accelerate this great transformation, this great shift in consciousness and zeitgeist that we're in right now, and kind of the themes that I spoke to earlier. I look at it as my mission in the stories that we're telling, to using various levers for various audiences in different ways. How do we continue to push that transformation?
Thank you. Tanaya, someone is curious about if you have any storytelling that you could point us to that really is affecting change for missing and murdered Indigenous people, affecting that issue generally. So anything that you could share?
I can't think of anything right now, like in our current present time. But I will say that a few years ago, several friends and colleagues, one of them is here actually, we started an earring exhibit called Sing Our Rivers Red to help raise awareness about murdered and missing Indigenous women. And so many people came together for that. And sometimes I'll often leap without fully thinking things through. And when we put out the call for the earrings, people not only sent earrings, but they sent this earring is for this person in my community. This is how this person went missing, and those then became a part of the exhibit. And just all of those stories, that exhibit traveled for 4 years throughout the country. And I know people started more exhibits after that. Now it's something that everybody. Well, at least in my circle, everybody's talking about this issue of MMIWIR, and that for me is that power of storytelling, like just from people sharing their personal, real lived stories about people who they lost, and it just added another spark to that fire that is now burning, with everybody saying like, we're in danger, this is an issue, let's do something about it.
Thank you.
There are, I know of some films that are being made right now. There are over 200 Indigenous environmental activists who have been murdered in the last couple of years. And there are some films that are being made specifically on those stories. It'll be a couple of years before they come out, but just one thing.
Thank you. Thank you both. So one final question. The room is filled with folks who are working in their communities to affect positive change. And what words of advice, encouragement, wisdom would you want to leave this group with regarding the power and potential of storytelling in their work?
The work is hard, and embracing the work is necessary. And know that you're on the right path, even when it's hard. And just remind yourself that you're the caterpillar in that goo sometimes, trying to get to the other side. And if you hold the path, I believe and hope you'll get there.
Yeah, I honestly think, and again, I just want to shout out one of my friends and colleagues, Hannah Bablu, if you know her, she's out in the audience. But I saw her do a presentation once, and these questions, which are around storytelling, just have always stuck with me. And it was, who are you, where are you from, or who do you belong to, what do you do, and why? And I always tell people that those, in my mind, those 4 questions are the roadmap to heart work, because you have to know who you are. For so much of us, that has to do with the community and the people, where you come from. Who do you belong to, because that's the people who hold you accountable in this work, and what are you doing and why? And I think thinking about those things, and sometimes asking yourself those things every day, because some of us deal with the burnout, and then if you're getting angry and doing the work you're doing, it's like, do I need rest, or do I need to keep doing this work, or do I need to pivot? Because each of you have gifts, each of you has a fire, and you can choose how you want that fire to burn and where.
All right. So I want to thank you both for being with us today, for sharing your stories, for sharing your, again, wisdom about the art of storytelling. Please join me again in thanking Jeff and Tanaya.